Chonam Lai Chanjoy Pardo and Dani Japsui Dagin Jinso and Jebe Sonam Dolai Penjere Sanje and Dobrai Joy Sanje Chodan and Soje Chonam Chanjoy Pardo and Dani Japsui Dagin Jinso and Jebe Sonam Dolai Penjere Sanje Dobrai Joy Sanje Chod Chancho and Pardo and Dani Japsu Dagin Jinso and Jebe Sonam Dolai Penjere Sanje Dobrai Joy Simjen Tomjen Dewai Devin Judan Dembrai Juj Dungalai Dine, Dungalai Gin, Judan, Talvarai Juji, Dungalai Meben, Dewai, Tambai, Dan, Mendavarai Juji, Nirin, Chadan, Nidan, Dravi, Tanyaman Chambo, Lai, Nebra, Juroi, Samjan, Tamjan, Dewa, Devin, Judan, Dembra, Jurji, Dungalai Dine, Dungalai Gin, Judan, Talvarai Juji. Dungalai Meben Dewai Tamba Dan Mendavara Injuji Niring Chada Nidan Dravi Nanyamai Chambo Lai Nebra Injuri Samjian Tamjian Dewa Devi Injudan Dembra Injuji Dungalai Dan Dungalai Gin Judan Talvara Injuji Dungalai Meben Dewai Tamba Dan Mendavara Injuji Niring Chada Nidan Dravi Tanyamai Chambola, Nebra Injuroi, Jumden, Jamblai, Yanlai, Chansai, Loi, Kange, Lord, Timne, Tendra, Nidrai, Nandai, Rapsalavi, Chinye, Dogun, Chichi, Sishin, Nije, Tugarai, Legbams. Sibe zonrarai mare mentam dungalai jinse ven rozai kunlai boje darzi yanlai chojo yangden zon rudarai chondroi nyamai nyelo leje jandroi droze je marege mase dungalai nyugoi chinye jenze ralden Tene Lajin Sajo Tarzo Yenden Lenzo Jase Tu Juja Judan Juni Jendre Daloi Musul Jambala Yang Lai Du Zedin Cheji Chanrava Vesareji Daloi Dimo Mamba Rapsalani Kadan Tenju Shunoi Tobai Lord Bobe, Nawan Zalando, Solo, Saje, Peje, Junje, Medo, Etam, Rerai, Lingshin, Yide, Jambot, Sanje, Shindo, Migde, Pulwai, Drugan, Nanda, Shinla, Chebrai, Sho, Samje, Namje, Samba, Tan, Loi, Chenda, Chedar. Chechung Temai Tekbai Chuje Kolo Gordo Solo.
Good afternoon, dear Dhamma friends. I welcome you once again to this session of receiving the precious Buddha Dharma. That is called Bodhisattva Avatara, the teaching of a realized Bodhisattva during ancient Indian times, known as Shantideva. And so now we have come to the part where it explains the procedure, more or less, basically, to generate the aspirational aspect of the bodhicitta and the applicational aspect of the bodhicitta. Again, from a scholarly point of view or from a more technical point of view, there are various traditions in terms of the different aspects of the bodhicitta that are explained, such as in this case the aspirational and applicational part. Aspirational aspect would be considered as the in simple words, the wish, the will. It defines devotion, it defines interest, it defines trust. Whereas the application defines the actual taking or actual generating, actual applying. The application itself expresses the whole point, that it's the actual activity. And in the first chapter itself, Shantideva himself describes the two in a very simple and understanding analogy that in Tibetan known as Ndrovar Ndetang, Ndrowa Yi, Ndrovar Ndepa in Ndrowa. Ndrovar Ndepa means basically in a context of wishing to reach a particular destination, the thought that you want to journey there, that thought itself is like the aspiration. And the actual taking of the journey, such as now taking the first step and all the way until you reach, is known as the applicational aspect. So that's the analogy that he uses. And sometimes they are, in terms of the procedure of now actually generating the bodhicitta, sometimes the two aspects of the bodhicitta are sometimes given separately, sometimes together, and in this case it's given or it's taken, it's generated simultaneously. So these differences are just there for our benefit, according to how we like. Now, before we go into the chapter, the subject of bodhicitta itself, one thing that you may want to think about, study, learn, and talk about, discuss, is particularly if you have teachers with whom you can discuss. It will be very interesting to also discuss the difference, is to see if there is a difference between refuge and bodhicitta. Sometimes you may have not really thought about that. Some of you may have thought about that. Are they the same? Are they different? And if they're the same, how? And if they're different, how? So, according to each teacher's tradition, there may be differences, or even if it's from the same lineage, again, due to the individual, there may be differences, but those differences are express or show or display, just like how we have different opinions about what is a good cup of espresso, let's say, what is good coffee in a way. So, of course, it's not absolute, but it shows various angles of it. So therefore, it's good to know. It doesn't mean that one is absolute and the rest is not. It just shows various angles, and therefore it helps us to have a larger perspective. In short, one could say that there is almost no difference between the refuge, meaning taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, and generating into bodhicitta. There won't be much of a difference if it is within the same, how do I say this? If it is on the same path, meaning if one's motivation is to truly benefit all sentient beings, then accordingly we will take refuge in that way. Accordingly we will generate bodhicitta in that way. If it is not, then again, accordingly. How is, in terms of its tradition, in terms of its time, it's mainly based on the Theravada tradition, one could say. It is coming not particularly because of the Theravada tradition, but mainly because of our own emotion, one could say. Probably that's a better way to put it. Meaning that we all have, the possibility, unless we are enlightened. Unless we are enlightened, we have the possibility to feel the need to renounce, to liberate, to be liberated, to be free, one could say. Basically, there's a sense of fear. Yes. Again, just like yesterday, as I said about dukkha, that these are words that we might not feel comfortable to begin with, but if we try to understand it, and if we try to face it with courage, there is great wisdom. So there is this possibility that due to our emotions, that we might experience some sense of fear. Could be about simply basic. The fears could come due to basic circumstances, such as to begin from survival instincts, or to sustain, or then of course as it progresses. In short, one could say fear in terms of for one's own sake, and then as it grows, as it develops, then fear for others, one could say. So the refuge idea is mainly coming from, to begin with, it comes from that fear, that sense of fear. To be more to put it in a spiritual context, particularly in a Buddhist context, it is the idea of refuge is coming from wanting to renounce fear. That's why often the refuge can be defined as, in Tibetan, jikyo, jikpa le choba. Jikpa means basically fear or destruction. And Chop means the refuge, the support. So it is coming from that idea. Whereas now, in the context of taking, or in the context of wanting to benefit all sentient beings, then this sense of fear is not just for one's own sake, but for everyone's sake, because there is a sense of fear for the rest. Just like a father or a mother or a parent or a guardian, that they have a sense of fear for theirs, or for their young ones, or for their children. So therefore, the refuge, how do I say this? Not to say component, but the refuge step itself is, it begins with, of course there are hundreds of ways, actually, there are countless of ways of describing it. One way, one personal way that I will try to put is that in terms of fear, one thing that we want to protect in the first instance is, almost one could say, to protect one's own body, yes, to protect this precious existence. And so, in terms of why we want to protect this physical precious existence, it may differ according to our emotion, according to how much of an experience we have. But let's say from a somewhat experienced point of view, then we see that this this precious existence is precious, is rare, it's beneficial. Well, many more reasons like that, and therefore one wishes to somehow protect it from any kind of harm, basically. So in order to do that, one must enter in, or one must engage or enter or apply ourselves in a routine where we learn how to protect oneself, how to protect this precious existence. And so therefore, one of the first things that was automatically produced, one could say, not to say produced, but explained or shown by Buddha, was not exactly to say the Ten Commandments, but somehow a relative way to actually preserve, protect this physical existence. Therefore, then what is known as the individual liberation vows are explained. And so therefore refuge is, in many ways, it can be described as one or the first of the individual liberation vows, in Sanskrit known as pratik moksha, I think. So therefore, in that way, if you look at refuge in that way, there is a little bit of a difference in terms of the vow of the Bodhisattvas or the Bodhicitta, because that's not entirely based on, or not solely based on, preserving this physical body, but to go to the source, meaning one's the source of all this, the source of our experience is all coming from the consciousness or the mind. So therefore, its focus is to go to the essence, which is the consciousness itself. So therefore, it's a vow for the mind, one could say, not for the body. So in that way, there is a little difference, but otherwise, the refuge vows of the Bodhisattva way, the Bodhicitta vows of the Bodhisattva way, are both same, because its motivation, its intention is the same, because it's to protect, is to benefit all sentient beings. So there's this slight difference, but it's something that you can try to examine for yourself, and it should be very, very beneficial. It also gives you a reason to go back to the first two chapters also. we can maybe continue a little there. Yesterday I was talking towards the end a lot about this term in Tibetan mepa. Probably some of you might find it a little confusing, since technically the mepa, or the motivation probably, is that term is applied mainly for individuals who are wishing to gain the Bodhisattva qualities, such as the 10 bhumis. And so therefore, it's not purely reserved for the first bhumid Bodhisattvas, let's say. So therefore, there are various names that defines what kind of a Bodhisattva one is or we are. Beginners or foundation level practitioners will be known as Bodhisattvas who mainly base themselves in training what is the mepa. Whereas individuals who wish, who have almost, one could say, completed, excelled in the mepa or the motivation, are known as who have seen the truth in a way, who have seen the reason, who has who has extraordinary aspiration. So therefore, in Tibetan, that is known as laksam, lakpe samba. Lakpa means extraordinary. Samba is in terms of thought or motivation. So basically, with extraordinary motivation, with extraordinary mepa, one could say. So, just to clarify from what I said yesterday, for some of you, it's something like that. Now, from the now the 22nd and 23rd verses from the 3rd chapter are both the vows, practice, vows and practices and explanation, everything. According to the Shantideva's way. The first verse more or less describes, many describe it as the procedure to generate aspiration. The 23rd, or the second one, is described as the procedure to generate the application. And in terms of now practicing bodhicitta, of course we have a formal procedure, and this is the one. But often what happens is that we become very inspired, and when we go through the formal taking of the vow during a special occasion or something like that. But afterwards, most of us, one could say, due to circumstances, due to time, due to schedule, due to many, many reasons, we somehow lack the awareness to actually continue, almost one could say in a modern term, updating the vow, you know. So therefore, actually as a part of practice, particularly these two verses are something that we must recite as a part of practice on a regular basis every day. So that we are reminded, we become more and more aware of who we are, or who we want to become, you know. And these few passages are very short, actually. If you recite it, it won't take more than 5 minutes, and therefore it's not time-consuming at all. And whatever 5 or 10 minutes that we spend on this is for certain that it's the most worthwhile 5 minutes or the 10 minutes of one's day. Those are 5 or 10 minutes that we can feel most proud of. Where we can have a total conviction that I did something truly meaningful. So therefore, I would highly encourage all of you to not just get inspired by just taking a formal recitation of this from time to time, but regularly at your own home, wherever you are, whenever, wherever you may be, to take time to go through this. And in case, of course, if you have more time, then I would suggest you to read at least the first 3 chapters. I won't say that it will replace your formal practices, because if I do that, then it may become a source of reason to relax. But in terms of, if you ask ourselves, which is better, you know, the formal practice or the first 3 chapters, I would say it's the same, actually, in terms of benefit. There is no difference. The more we can engage in both, the better it is. Yes. But if you have really shortage of time, at least to read these few passages, these coming few passages, because then it will really strengthen one's, one could say, one's purpose of life. And I mean, the benefit is just, I mean, there are countless of benefits within this text itself. Shows that there's, it's countless, it's immeasurable. Personally, I would say that maybe in a day, sometimes we might have extremely mundane activities that we feel that we almost feel extremely exhausted because it's too mundane. Maybe in a day we were able to only finish one task, which is to maybe to clean the room or to do the laundry, you know. And even that, it took the whole day. And as a result, one feels extremely lethargic and somehow disappointed. As you know, I try to bake bread from time to time, whenever there is time. Well, not as important as the practice itself, but secondarily, I try from time to time. And of course, there were times where I was spending, there was one time I almost spent 3 hours actually, because the ingredients were measured wrong. The dough became extremely sticky. It went all over my clothes. It dirtied the whole board. And as you know, some of you might have baked, so therefore one of the problems that can occur is that if the dough is too wet, then you might want to add a little bit more. Becomes, of course, that already makes things messy. And then you add a little bit more, and even worse. So like that, it took a long, long time. And to a point where I felt that I was not able to do anything worthwhile, for those 3 hours. So there are many occasions or many days where we feel somewhat like that, I suppose. That's just a simple example. But if we are able to continue with this practice, particularly if we are able to read these passages with concentration, with clarity, consciously, if we are able to go through these, then no matter how mundane a day we have gone through, it won't matter. You will feel that the day was most productive because of it, that I can assure you. So therefore I would like to ask all of you to do that, and also encourage others also to do that, and be an example. The best way to encourage others is not really by saying it to them, but by doing it ourselves, and that goes a long way. I have said that many times before. Well, the 22nd verse. In this translation reads, just as the Sugatas of old adopted the spirit of awakening, and just as they properly conformed to the practice of the Bodhisattvas, so I myself shall generate the spirit of awakening for the sake of the world. And so I myself shall properly engage in those practices. Upon gladly adopting the spirit of awakening in this way, an enlightened person should thus nurture the spirit in order to fulfill his wish. Now my life is fruitful, human existence well obtained. Today I have been born into the family of the Buddhas. Now I am a child of the Buddha. Jitar hunji deshikji chanchub thuni jebadam chanchub simbe lapala teda remjin nebatar tejin rola pendento chanchub semne kenjishing tejento na lapala yang riba jindo lapar ji jitar lodan dembai rabdan chanchub semzonne njuk chan jebra chaweche semne dedra zingdo to dengdo dansen rebuye mi sipa lepar thop jiring sanje riksoje sanje seso dading jur. Just as the previous Sugatas gave birth to an awakening mind, and just as they successfully dwelt in the Bodhisattva practice, likewise, for the sake of all lives, do I give birth to an awakening mind. And likewise, shall I too successfully follow the practices. In order to further increase it from now on, those with discernment who have lucidly seized an awakening mind in this way should highly praise it in the following manner. Today my life has fruit, in brackets says born fruit, having well obtained this human existence, I have been born in the family of Buddha. And now I am one of Buddha's children. So basically it's the first two verses that I mentioned earlier. Like I said yesterday, it seems like there's a sort of a build-up towards this point, and so therefore we get anxious and we feel that now there is a sort of a state of climax where we are about to come across something supernatural, something miraculous, let's say. But like I said yesterday, the truth is very, very simple. I mean, if you read this, it's so simple that we feel like there is no much need to really explain these two particular passages in large detail. Normally, particularly in this, just for these two passages, one could say, there are tons of commentaries, excerpts, and so on. The tons of commentaries, the reason they are required is because one way that I understand is that we are basically from the moment we are born until now, within this human condition, we are almost overwhelmed by in short, elaborate things, complicated things. And so therefore, we have created a habit already from the moment we are born almost. And as a result, then when we come across very, very simple things, it's actually quite difficult for us to really engage and understand its simplicity. It takes a lot of energy to actually come down from that level of complicated state to a very a simple state, actually, very practical state. When these passages say that I follow, or I aspire to generate bodhicitta in the same way as the Bodhisattvas or previous Bodhisattvas, it just means that. There's nothing more, nothing less. It's the same case when we say that I want to both aspire and apply in the same way. Same thing. That there is nothing more, nothing less. And in terms of what the previous Buddhas and Bodhisattvas did in terms of generating bodhicitta, it wasn't also something very, very complicated actually. It was very simple. I forget the names, but for example, our historical Shakya, Buddha Shakyamuni, I'm sure some of you might know that long ago, we can almost see in a galaxy far, far away, that he was a son of a farmer, and he had the fortune to come across a Buddha. And he was so impressed by the Buddha's presence, and it so happened that even the Buddha himself that day was passing by that village for the daily alms. And somehow that boy happened to be the very first to meet the Buddha, and of course he asked who he is and why are you here and all that. And Buddha answered everything. He said, I'm a Buddha, I'm an enlightened being, and I have come for the daily alms. And so he offered what he had, and in turn it is customary and well, one of the most simplest of customs, one could say, one of the most natural customs, that one of the most classical customs, which is to exchange, you know. Even this subject is talking about exchange. This whole mind training of the text is based on exchange. Exchanging what, if you say, exchanging one's state or one's being with others' state or others' being. So, coming back to the story, the exchange was that that because the boy had offered something, then the Buddha would ask in return, "What do you wish for?" So, since he was so impressed by the Buddha's presence, he said, "I just want to become just like you." So, and then Buddha basically how to say, complied with his wish by saying that, "May it be so." And as we know, Buddha being so pure that whatever he says, it becomes true, because he is known as how do I say this? Tangsong in some ways, Tangsong Chenpo. I don't know what is the exact translation. Tangsong. Rishi, yes, that's the one. Rishi in Sanskrit. Basically, a person, a genuine person, basically. Tang, Song, basically those are more or less, it carries the same meaning. Tang means basically straightforward, honest. Song, it also means basically erect, you know, so not bent and sort of crooked, but straight, honest. So therefore, he's known as that, or great or Maharishi, because he has, how do I say, completed or accomplished all virtues of the body, speech and mind, in short. So therefore, in this case, the speech is pure speech, because there is no lie, there is no agenda. It is pure, genuine as it can get. So therefore, he said, "May it be so." And as a result, that boy became just like that Buddha, after many, many eons, of course. But the point is, it became true. And similarly, there are many, well, not just legends or stories, but actual facts. According to our current era of human civilization, we may not have the means and tools to judge or record history, these sort of histories. But in fact, it is history. It's not just a story. And therefore, another example was also when, well, this is probably an interesting story, or interesting history, because just like how we are not comfortable to hear dukkha, probably it might be even more so when we hear the term hell, inferno. The red cauldron, whatnot. Basically, as I said yesterday, since there is no real law, there is no real rule, because everything is too organic. As a result, sometimes, if the mind has too many emotions and has piled too many karmic debts, then sometimes it goes through very strong experiences to a point where such experiences are as real as it gets, like now. So, therefore, such state, such existence is, by many actually, is considered as a state of, well, hell. So, when one has manifested such state, such experience, it is said that then until that lifespan is done, and during that stay, there is basically no room, no space, no opportunity to think of anything else but to be totally consumed and overwhelmed by the karmic result, namin in Tibetan known as. So the whole state is almost 99.9 an experience of result, and there is no room to accumulate any other karmas. So it's basically it states that there is simply almost no chance to do anything other than to sort of live out that term. But I was, however, the illogical thing that I was saying yesterday, about how compassion is illogical. One of the examples is this particular history, one could say, that there was one of the very, very first in terms of, not in a linear way, okay, but in one of the rebirths, previous rebirths, before he became known as our present Buddha, he experienced that very state called hell realm, and in there then basically, of course, went through all the ordeals just like everybody, and basically one day he had, well, of course there are countless of sentient beings there, and one of the sentient beings happened to be somehow working together, let's say almost like a partner, let's say now, to slog and to do whatnot, basically to lift and carry and pull heavy things. And of course, because of one's karmic result, that you have very vivid forms of anger, vivid forms of basically anger, so, or fear, one could say, in the form of maras, in the forms of guards, in the forms of executioners, whatnot. So one of the sentry or the guard was basically really beating the other person so much that to a point where the main character felt that this is a little too much, I mean, just out of instinct almost, and feel that maybe one could do away with this, that maybe one can relieve a little bit of that pressure. This is like unnecessary pressure. And it was just as simple as that, nothing more. nothing extraordinary. And of course, the gods or whatever that are there, they are all, of course, nothing but projections of your mind. And so they are able to sort of read your mind. And the god read his mind and said, who are you to dictate terms in here? I'm the boss, you know. And so therefore, do you wish to change karma? Do you think you have that power? Do you think you have such means to alter karma? You are here because of karma. And so basically, of course, first scolded, and towards the end he hit his hammer on his head, and the character died. And afterwards, immediately he was born in the celestial realms. Why? Yes. Why? Because for a fraction of a moment, that although in an environment where you cannot actually have any feelings towards others, that this person was able to do so. And just due to that minute form of feeling something towards others, out of a little bit of kindness, let's say, that he was able to actually release or basically pay off the karmic debt. So that is also one of the previous rebirths, one could say, of the present, what is known as Buddhist. So therefore, one could say that the reason why I say illogical is because it's illogical. I mean, if you just calculate 1 plus 1 and so on and so forth, it's illogical, yes? Well, from a mathematical point of view, it's abnormality, yeah? So, therefore, it's abnormal. It's illogical that in such an environment, such a thing could take place. And so therefore, it shows the strength of a simple kindness. It shows the strength of care. It shows the sign of compassion, basically. So now, over here, where we say that we aspire, we apply the bodhicitta, all we are doing is that very simple thing, nothing more, nothing less. So we don't need to really crack our heads and to think that there is something very, very deep, or there's something very vast that it's too large for us, or it's too deep that we would need an amazing microscope to see something. It doesn't. As long as we are sane, as long as we have a consciousness, we can relate. And that's the wonderful news. I mean, that's the wonderful fact, that we all can relate, no matter who we are. And it's that simplicity that we must try to, well, as this chapter's translation's name says, adopt at the moment. Maybe it's the right word, adopt. Because we are so used to concepts of having everything manifested in a dualistic context. That I'm here, you're there, sort of this dualistic sort of perspective. That probably it's right because right now we are at a stage where we can only relate to the idea of adopting something. But overall, actually, there is no really need to adopt or not adopt, or there is a thing to adopt, or there is a thing to abandon the idea of adopting or anything. As I said, in short, actually it is as simple as I said before, that all we need to do is somehow pay attention that there is nothing more, nothing less. Yeah. Just like if you're good, you're good. So I'm not sure if I'm explaining it well here, but nevertheless, I personally feel that that's how we should kind of engage. And if we engage it in that way, then one could say it's the perfect mechanism to generate this very wonderful and truly organic thing. So it's like the perfect balance. I'm trying to go through the questions so that maybe we can relate. Yes. Well, something Sugata, something Sujata. Sugata, yes. Yes, his question was, what is Sugata, or who is Sugata? Who is this person? Is it a Mr. Sugata, or is it a Mrs. Sugata, or what, Very good question. Well, the Tibetan name, the Tibetan says that Devara Shekpa, that's the translation in Tibetan, Sugata, Devara Shekpa. Basically, it's another name for Buddhas. That, well, to be able to describe its meaning in full detail, it may take a few more books to describe. But in short, it simply means that someone who has realized the truth, who has gone towards the truth, or who has one could say embrace the truth completely, but there are, of course, we can put it in so many ways, but basically probably realized the truth probably is the right word, yeah. Meaning knowing what is what. Right now we are in a state where one can almost confidently say that we really don't know what is what, yes. For example, very basic example, that we just know a fraction of what is white, the color, or what is black. But there are tons of things that we don't know about this phenomena called white, actually. We only know one perspective. There are other philosophies, there are other religions where it describes countless of things about every phenomena, But of course, in Buddhism, it's not the most important thing right now to understand all of that. Although it becomes an aim to understand later on for the sake of all sentient beings, because you must know everything. You must know everything about how to babysit, basically. Because if you're a babysitter, you have no control, you have no freedom over who you're going to babysit. Yes?